what it takes to deliver in the work you do, and you are there to coach and guide those that work with and for you to deliver at the same level. So that's not what this conversation needs to be about. When I sit down and say, okay, am I running my business well? Am I doing well? Okay, where am I? Where does my focus or energy go? Run, grow, deliver. For delivery, it's about, did quality show up? And can I tweak and enhance the interactions when I do? It's not a technical conversation. Solve that separately. Here's what I want to explore with you. I'm not quite ready to retire the fish metaphor completely, but I'm almost there. And in this case, it may not be with advisors that you're working to for growth, but it's those that work for you and with you. And what I want to table today is the idea that focusing in on interactions and improving team dynamics, how we show up, what's working so people feel valued in a purpose-driven work is, in fact, the secret sauce for talent retention and attraction. And so if we just honed in now for a minute about delivery, again, not to change your technical, but to be able to say, what could I do differently? And hone in on strengthening the interactions such that the people I engage with and the people that work for me feel that they're at their best. I thought we'd explore this interaction model that we have as part of Impetus. And I just wanted to introduce it to you to see if it helps you and gives you some insight. What struck me is I'm convinced that in the next 5 years, because my reputation so strongly has been rooted in target operating model and process design as a process guru, more and more though, in the last 3 years, I have been engaged to talk about interactions and help teams change their activities or processes in their meetings, in their interactions, more than in their transactional activities. I'm convinced that in the next 5 years, this is the next spot where organizations, it's low-lying fruit to improve the efficiency, reduce waste, to try to trim transactions. That's happened, but organizations like yours have been investing in improving efficiency and activity and process for a long time. The next spot seems to be, how do I change the interactions? Because what happens in knowledge worker space, as Bain Management had written in Time, Talent, and Energy, you churn. So that was material that went out last year. I don't know, there was a bestseller book, but they talked about how much it uses your energy in meetings and interactions. And the churn that is created in large organizations, if quantified, far outreaches any process efficiency you might do in the handling of activities and tasks. So even if you deployed a whole bunch of continuous improvement initiatives to change the activities so that what once took 5 steps now takes 2, you still locked your people down in meetings, interactions, and in email communications that create this paralyzing effect on your energy and your ability to be as innovative as you want to be. And the groups that are noticing it are your younger talent, who have learned to source and almost partially attention information as they read and review constantly. Have you felt a bit of that churn? It's where the next opportunity is for how we change the way we work. It isn't just about the process any longer, and I thought we would explore that a bit. So when we talk about your time spent in delivery, no doubt your great interactions, and this again is with your people, and or you together with your folks with clients. Part of our interaction model says there's your ability to have connected thinking, which means, let's play this out in real terms. Did you get brought in at the right time? So this is the sequencing of connected thinking. How many times have you been a part of a meeting where you should have known about it 3 meetings ago? Therefore, you're now in catch-up or have you considered mode that is 2 steps removed. It could have been changed the path if you've been engaged sooner. That speaks to the connected thinking and the being mindful that you're in that orbit. Is that reasonable? Have you felt that? The energy and effort it took to fold back on that, can that be extensive? To say, oh, we missed that, you haven't thought about. And so continuing to move in interactions that we have connected thinking, that we're mindful of other groups. Who do I need to connect with? And sequencing that is a big part of this. Both when you engage your trust officers, when you do not. It can include that as well as advisors and other individuals across the organization. The next, on the far right, in a good interaction model, be really clear about the information exchange. when we do activities in process, we can see it. Something's been created. So if something is being created, it's tangible. But exchanging information has this intangibility, doesn't it? You can't see it. But if you actually sat down and read, maybe not in a form, because it's become more overt and it's tangible, but even in an email, what information did I just give? Did I provide? What information did we just exchange? What I'm challenging you to think about is, are you being as efficient as you could in exchanging information, and can you do it with different methods? It doesn't mean that you need everything to go into the red and be a meeting. I'm encouraging you instead to focus on two things. Do we have connected thinking? Are we sequenced at the right time and involved in the right conversation, both you engaged and how you engage others? And in the method by which we exchange information, am I clear about the information being exchanged? And can that be done in a different way? A phone call, an IM, a memo, a briefing. Does it always have to be in a meeting, which creates this compounding churn of meeting after meeting after meeting? If you don't experience that problem, then ignore me and don't do any work in the purple. But I hazard a guess that just by sitting back and trying to look at information as a thing that's being produced, perhaps on your conveyor belt of across and within your groups, is there a way to improve the way information is exchanged such that it is value add and not done multiple times? If you do that, you can start to reduce the effort and time and that churn I experienced before you even showed up in a meeting, before you're even in the red. But what we thought, sit with that for a minute. If you actually counted the time and the hours, in meeting or outside, and there are analytics, Microsoft has Delve Analytics, there are many out there that start to look at your Outlook even, and take a look at your calendars and your schedules. This is a problem that is showing up repeatedly, and it's definitely showing up inside the knowledge worker space in the work you do. And as you run your businesses, knowing that you have that pie, I have to run, I have to grow, and I have to deliver. Within this realm of deliver, I'm simply suggesting to you, if you can fine tune, that you sequence it right or you're a part of it to avoid the churn, that you can start to look at information, how it's exchanged, to see if I can do that efficiently. Or did this information need to be shared at all? It creates noise. And when we show up in a meeting, can we do something different? Any ahas in that? I'm convinced that in the next 5 years, that's where everybody wants me to go. Because it's hidden. But it is absorbing the energy and the creative insight and the innovative nature of people across organizations. More so than any task that we can see and try to lean down. So, thought we'd explore as a final tool with you today, a light one to end our time. You've been great. What happens when you end up in a meeting? Oh my God! Could you do something differently? So I thought we'd have fun with that and share a bit of elaborating on the red circle. You in? All right. So let's use the good meeting model that we've developed to say, here's what it looks like when a meeting works together. And it helps if you've been a facilitator, because your job is to hone in on creating good structure. Your job is to listen to all the movement of information so you know if it was poorly constructed or you didn't do a good job. So you're sort of like watching it. And with that experience, we've looked and said, there are 4 components to a really good meeting. Above the line are things that are tangibles. And these have been written since the 80s. I still have material about always have a scribe, always have an agenda. I mean, those are those tangible things. And I don't want to elaborate on those other than to remind you that even if you hone in, above the line has to have an element of good practice. And in good practice, it includes things like reasonable meeting roles. It includes reasonable prep. In fact, in one organization, we added something called a 2-day in advance prep, which is a primer, meaning 2 days in advance of a meeting where you invited folks from cross-functional. You make sure that there is, if nothing else, a purpose of the meeting, some degree of agenda that includes the topics to be covered, so that those invited can get clear in their mind 2 days in advance of what I need to do when I show up, and if there were any materials you needed me to read. Just changing that 2 day in advance, here's what the organization found. They're like, oh my God, are you kidding me? This is creating work for prep. Okay, how much work do you do post-meetings to socialize, to loop back around, to have the sub-meeting of the sub-meeting? And when they tracked and counted that time, they went for the prep. So the only rule they did, and in a growth mindset, I know, I didn't get it, it's like a day and a half, I missed it. Isn't that powerful? Because they're trying for the 2-day out of respect and courtesy for those that they've invited. So material and agenda. Shift in here, sending pre-read or pre-work doesn't mean you send the exact material. You were not sent in advance of this discussion, which you will get, by the way, the actual speaking notes. By slide. You were sent what we wanted you to think about. We thought of you. What would help prime your thinking to show up? And all we gave you was, there's a bit of a frame around run, grow, deliver. What does that mean? Then there was a video on Carol Dweck and an article to read that talked about and explored interactions and micro moves. And that's where we're at now. Small moves, small gestures. Those two things were essentially pre-read material and in some senses an agenda. Above the line, tangible. Let's go to the right-hand corner. When you open your discussions and your meetings, try this. If you've had a meeting for an hour, the first 10 minutes should ground everyone. I've had folks say, oh my God, I'm gonna spend 10 minutes. Yes, because if you didn't, and then the 10 minutes might shrink, but it shouldn't. You should always ground folks and be clear. This is our purpose. I like this line, and I've used it and written it on a whiteboard time and again. We will know we were successful at the end of this discussion if you ask that question at the beginning, then I, as the organizer, know what I would finish the sentence with. It's very powerful to ask others, what did you come into this agenda hoping that we would get to? What does success look like for you? And just having that landing conversations, you now have a common story and a common purpose. That's on the top right-hand side. We will know we were successful if at the end of this meeting, we accomplished this. That is powerful. It grounds people because now you've been clear on the purpose, you've gotten clear on the outcomes, and you're very tangible in what are the asks of people. Just changing those two things, tweaking those two things above the line and tangible, people will walk in and go, okay, now I know what you need from me. And they'll show up with energy in a different way. Are you looking for my energy, my engagement, or are you simply looking for my time? And if you actually reflect on that, you show up and you lean in a different way when people are asking for your energy versus just asking for your time. By being clear about that above the line, you will start to see a difference in the way people show up. Now, below the line is where the cool part starts. And this is what comes from observing. When you're a facilitator and observing, you say, what made that work? What made that work? Group mindset made it work. What does mindset mean? Everything below the line is the intangibles. And I'm suggesting the visual here is as if it's a meeting table. So I want you to picture this is a meeting table. And for that meeting to go well, you needed to include the two things in the tangibles above the line, and you need to be very mindful of the below the line. What does it mean in group mindset? Well, we've got a few more, but the one I wanted to highlight for you is managing bias. What does bias mean? Bias is the product of the mental shortcuts we use in our brain. We use heuristics, H-E-U-R-I-S-T-I-C-S. We use heuristics to manage the information overload and make decisions. I have no idea why I continue to buy Tide Pods. Maybe it's because my mother always bought Tide Pods. Will I ever consider gain? I don't think so. Have you seen the extent of the aisle and the choices we need to make? But my own bias, my own meaning that I've applied to it, that Tide works and Tide works well, is always going to direct me very efficiently or add to the list so my husband does the same of picking up Tide Pods. You joke, I joke, you laugh. It's true, isn't it? Both from the information we look at work to the decisions we make as consumers. We attach meaning, beliefs. It's called the ladder of inference. Psychological belief of the ladder of inference. When someone says, I've jumped to conclusions, you just jumped 3 rungs. You added your meaning, your beliefs, the ladder of inference. You'll see it online. It's quite extensive from the psychology of how we look at it. When we work our way through and up the rungs of ladder and we apply our own judgment to things, it's our mindset and how we show up. If you could just manage bias in the room, you'd go a long way. You want to know how I manage bias? I ask. Here's the bias I'm showing up with in this conversation. How are you doing? What's the bias you're showing up with in this conversation? And it didn't matter whether we were working with a municipality and it was heads of the various departments. Hey guys, can you declare your bias as we look to improve this workflow? And the community services gentleman said, here's my bias. It either impacts the community citizens or it doesn't. And the gentleman responsible for efficient and safe roads, here's my bias. Anything we come up with, if I don't see that it's going to impact safety and turn it around in 30 days, I'm not going to like it. Just having that conversation openly about bias will actually start to help redirect the purpose and make sure you're aligned. So my encouragement to you is simply be mindful of group mindset and start with managing bias, which is often driven by our own beliefs of what we've known and also how we're measured, what it is we need, what success looks like for us in this moment. So you can ask, how are you approaching this situation? What do you need? I am under pressure. My forecast is way below where it needs to be, so I am coming from a place of looking for quick solutions. That is absolutely going to bias your ability to consider or think about, not a good way or bad way, but it's fair, right? To consider or think about a longer run solution. But if you declared it in the beginning, folks understand you. Another one in the intangibles that will really help the table work well is that you create a group process. You create the mechanics of how you come and show up. And that's on you as leaders. Manage the discussion. Use your fish bones. Be creative such that people know mentally, where are you taking me? When you think about group process, I want you to think about the personal trainer who says, now we're going to go to this machine. Okay, I can do that. Now we're going over here. Okay, I can do that. The stress on your brain is far less in that situation than you showing up on your own, looking at equipment and making a decision about what you needed to do, isn't it? Because someone else did that for you. They created the structure of we're going to do this now, then this now. It's different than the tangible agenda and prep. It's that you put some thought to, how am I going to create creative thinking? So an example of group process is the fact that we built Table Talk. At a certain time, we gave you a 3-minute talk one-to-one, which, by the way, you would not let happen. You blew our process out of the water. You were supposed to talk one-to-one and then the table for 5 minutes. From a process perspective, this group instantly said, not happening. We're going right to Table Talk. So be flexible. Be in flow. But had we not thought about creating the Table Talk, this would not have felt the way it feels right now. Because me sharing an idea, trying to create a breath of fresh air and give you some macro trends means nothing if you don't have the time to sit and absorb it and debate it, and with language that resonates with you. So to do that, we created the group process of this. How will you be a bit more intentional with the processes that you're going to introduce in your team meetings, in your interactions as a channel champion, to ensure that discussions are managed, creative thinking, and that there's a challenge of ideas. Just thinking about those two things below the line intangibly, they're intangible, you don't see them all the time, but if you put thought to it and prep how you're going to show up, you will see a marked difference in the effectiveness of the meetings and the experience and the interaction of the ideas shared. And so I encourage you to say, what could I do differently? Just in the meetings, in the red, when we show up. And if you really want to go at it, start to see, are we connected here? Were we brought in at the right time? Do we change the sequencing? And if you really want to play at your optimizing your interactions, think about the information you exchange and how that's working. Do you think you could do something with that? As simple as that. Do you see why I firmly believe that's going to be over 50% of where people go? Because this, I cannot get over how hard it is to make that show up. And you tell me why our meetings, when we come to a table, feel like churn. When you run them, absent of a facilitator who cares about those mechanics. What's happening? Why are they not as effective as they could be? And in so doing, why are they taking an hour when they should take 20? Why are they sit-down discussions when we relax and breathe versus a stand-up huddle focused around a whiteboard where we surface problems. Perhaps that whiteboard has a fishbone. Even changing your physiology changes the way we show up. And so I challenge you to adopt what has been happening and has been of more interest. Organizations in knowledge worker spaces, right to back office manufacturing that recognizes, because manufacturing has leveraged some of this, certainly good practice. How can you introduce some of this to really create enthusiasm with your folks? What are you going to take back to the branch? Like there is this ask of you that you came up with things through this 2-day conference that you're going to action and take back. Well, I want to give you the last few minutes here to think about some of those. And you can put them in your conference book if you want, or you can put them in our notes. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to go attack the red? Are you going to go after this? I'm definitely going to introduce fishbone with some problems. What are you going to do? Yeah.